All right, folks, this one has been sitting on my to-do list for quite some time. One that was recommended to me quite a bit ago, actually. What happened to the 9th generation? And so here's my react to that video.
We've designed the most consistently powerful next generation console. And we built state-of-the-art platform technology to allow every developer to realize their full vision.
Where are the games at?
Where are the games?
Where are the games?
It's dry. Where are the games?
I kind of keep waiting for them to do their thing.
I don't see anything.
These are easily the most pointless upgrades I've ever experienced.
What is the point of buying a console if you can just make a PC?
If you're gonna
So this is the problem. I'm getting a lot of this, and yes, there's been games out, but during the Xbox One and the PS4 era, we were truly spoiled. There was a lot of good games that came out, a lot of big games. 2023 saw a good amount of games come to consoles, some great, some not so great, but there were few and far between in terms of excellence. You know, the previous generation was full of excellence. And with the way console games are already just taking so long to develop, this is becoming a problem, and you are stuck there asking, where are the games? And it's not that there are no games there, it's just the amount of excellent games coming is just taking too long.
everything on PC, why not just buy a PC and ban console?
Where are the games? Where are the deadlines? Where are the projects? Where are the teases? Like, it feels weird that it's like,
Why buy consoles?
Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set.
Something's happening with video game consoles. They've changed from machines people couldn't wait to get their hands on to machines people couldn't wait to forget. And after weeks of digging, I boiled down every problem the 9th generation has down to 3. So let's break them down, starting with the most obvious of them all, the games. You see, every console generation is measured by one thing and one thing only: the games. The 360 had Halo 3, the PlayStation 3 had Uncharted, and the Wii had the Wii Sports Tennis game that broke all of our TVs. But unlike the previous generations, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X technically have way more games than any other console in history. Every week a new indie game releases, there's backwards compatibility for almost any game that you can think of, and if God forbid those older games didn't play well, then there's a pretty good chance it's been completely remade. So then why does this generation feel like it has nothing? How does that make any sense?
Was this all remastered, remade of old games? It's, you know, I get it, it's less risk, but there's the creativity in providing something new, something exciting just isn't there. It's missing. We are missing the amazing wonders of, you know, the Metal Gear series, or, you know, like the Ghost of Tsushima, or even the greatness of Halo. You know, the wonders that those games bring when you jumped in and got lost within those games is just missing.
Well, the answer starts getting more clear when we look at every hit this generation's had so far. There's a problem. Do you see it? Hold on, let me remove every game that was made primarily for the previous generation. Now let's remove every game that's considered a better playing experience on the PC. And last but not least, let's remove every remake or remaster of an existing game. The list is dramatically smaller.
And here's the thing. Spider-Man 2 is coming to PC. Final Fantasy 16 is coming to PC. Ratchet & Clank is on PC. And if you have a fast enough SSD, it actually plays better on your PC than it does on your PlayStation. So you can remove those 3 out as well. Jedi Survivor, I have no idea. I've heard they fixed the PC version now. So if that's the actual case, then you can remove that as well. So really the only thing we have is Astro Playroom.
Isn't it? I mean, if these games tell us anything, it's that there's something in the water at Insomniac and we gotta protect them at all costs.
they love me.
But this generation's games are actually a bigger problem than you'd think when we compare them to the previous generations, specifically the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii generation. For context, the 7th generation of consoles objectively had worse development tools, worse hardware to build games on, less people with skills to build them, and less documentation to learn from. I mean, these consoles released before social media was even a thing. Yet here's the games they released during the same amount of time as the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X.
Just look at that. Just look at that list, right? Just look at it. Dead Space, Oblivion, Left 4 Dead, Half-Life, Dead Rising, Mass Effect, Condemned was an amazing game. Fallout, for those that love it. Dead Rising, Viva Pinata, that was a wonderful game that I played with my kids. Prey is phenomenal on the 360. You got Bioshock, Bad Company, one of the best Battlefield games ever. Gears of War. Then you're just looking at the greats like, even more greats like Grand Theft Auto 4. You've got Gears 2. There's so many amazing games here that could only be realistically played on console. Obviously, some of the games like Orange Box for Half-Life was on PC, but games like Dead Rising and, Gears, Halo, these were always console.
That's pretty wild, right? You see, back then, every game was made solely for that generation of consoles without remakes, and you could forget about a PC port back then. I mean, that just wasn't a thing. Because during that time, Steam is just getting started, Blizzard makes like one game every decade, and Microsoft is pushing the insanely buggy games for Windows Live. But look, these games technically aren't telling you the full story. While most of these games are critically acclaimed, it's what they did for the industry that made the 7th generation so special. For example, Gears of War revolutionized third-person cover shooters, cooperative story, and the brown color palette that every game used for a lot longer than they should have. Wii Sports revolutionized motion controls made accessible for...
I just want to say this guy's editing is phenomenal. Wish I was, a fraction as talented as this. This is really, really good editing.
For a brand new casual audience. Technically, because of the Wii, anyone could play games now. Rest in peace to all the TVs out there. And back then, Call of Duty actually revolutionized FPS controls, multiplayer progression, and 60 frames per second as a staple of competitive multiplayer.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
But what's more insane is that the publishers that absolutely dominated in the 7th generation have completely bombed in this generation.
Next generation gaming!
Warner Brothers was on top of the world with Batman and Shadow of Mordor, but then they release Suicide Squad, a game that nobody wanted.
How you feeling, Floyd? Ready to kick your ass?
You just see the difference, right? Could you imagine if they released another next generation Batman Arkham game? Holy crap, that would have been like blown everything out of the water.
Nobody. Ubisoft dominates with Assassin's Creed, but then launches their quadruple A game Skull and Bones to crickets. Like, that game came out 2 months ago and no one's talking about it. It's already probably half off. Activision revolutionized multiplayer gaming with Call of Duty, a grounded military game, but now this is Call of Duty.
You could be the king, but watch the queen conquer.
Some good boobers though.
Why is Nicki Minaj in Call of Duty? The war game.
Money!
Also, Microsoft,
Pretty
the
much,
single biggest video game publisher in the world right now? Well, they launched Redfall completely broken, Starfield completely empty, Lionhead Studios completely fired, laid off 4 more companies during the making of this video.
You what?
And released 3 buggy, incomplete Halo games in a row. And they all hurt. Every single one of them hurt me. Quite significantly. So here's the $1 million question, if not $1 billion. What the heck is happening with video games? Well, you see, the simple answer that gains a lot of social credit these days is...
I'm going to say it before he says it. This is the first time I'm seeing this. I don't know. I bet you they're going to say making games is hard. And I'm sick and tired of hearing that. Because it was way harder back in the day of the 360. It was way harder back in the day of the PS1 and PS2. Because they had to actually, there was none of this, technological improvements that we have today. But I bet you that is exactly what he's going to say. Let's see.
making games is hard.
Making games is hard.
Making games is hard.
Making games is hard.
Making games is
I
hard.
pulled
Making
it.
games is hard.
Now, using my personal experience in the software development field, I've been doing it for like 10 years, I can't argue that the process is difficult.
No one said
But
it's
I can
easy.
argue that these companies seem to have no idea what people actually want to play.
And that is important. Because they have no idea, there's no creativity flowing, so they're just going back to the old games and re-releasing old games. And though seeing some of these older games come back and playing them and it's cool and everything, I want new stuff. And this is why more and more people are going to, the free-to-play games, the gacha games, because they provide a new experience almost every update. They provide you with a unique character, of course, I'm not going to get into the whole gambling side of things, but what I'm saying is that is what's pushing people and fueling people. They have great stories, some of them anyway. They have good gameplay, and they just provide you something fresh and new every, 4 or 5 weeks. So these games, we've already played them. Unless they're doing something drastically different, I personally just have no interest.
When we look at the games through that lens, we can start to see why we're getting so many remakes of games that were so successful before, so many live service Destiny or Fortnite clones, and why so many games are made for the previous generation with a higher install base first instead of the new consoles we spent $600 of our hard-earned Canadian money on. They weren't cheap, guys. Maybe we start building for them.
He has a point. He has a point. Make games for my goddamn console. And this is one of the reasons why I get really pissed off with the Series S, because if the Series S, due to its parity, can't run something for whatever reason, I just don't care. I paid $450 for my console and I am getting penalized because a weaker version of my console can't run it. What they should do is cut that feature out until they can get it working, and then release it once it is working, or if it just doesn't work, take that feature out. The game itself will play, but just release the game and release it for my platform as well. That's been my biggest gripe with this whole thing. Just release games for next generation consoles and make them only for next generation consoles, because you can do more. And anyone that says, oh, look at Horizon, or what was it? Was it Horizon Forbidden West that was released on PS4 as well? Or I think it was God of War Ragnarok. I can't remember. But the reality is, any game that they're making, feature-wise, is restricted by the PS4. If they wanted to do stuff that would require more RAM than the PS4 allowed, they physically couldn't do it for the PS5. So that version of the game was already handicapped before it left the door. That's I believe what he's about to say.
Just throwing that out there. Now, it might be because I love video games or because I'm Canadian and thus genetically predisposed to helping people come back stronger. That's that Zenkai in me, baby. So video game companies, here's some feedback that I'll give you free of charge. Ditch these consoles. No one thought the Xbox One was going to make it 2 years, let alone 11. Just take it out back to the farm, make it look at the sunset, do what you need to do. We're all on the same page. No one's going to be there and going to be like,
no, please, no, not the Xbox One and PS4. No, I love them so much.
Unfortunately, there actually is people that say that because there's so many people still on the PS4. And if these companies weren't releasing games for the PS4 and the Xbox One, I guarantee you'd see a much bigger uptake of the next generation consoles than you do today. But with so many games coming out with Xbox One and the PS4 in mind, this generation genuinely shouldn't exist. It shouldn't, because the amount of handicap that they have going into it, because they're restricted by what they can do on the previous gen consoles. I'm not even talking about the 30 FPS. I'm just talking about genuine actual features. But let's say, for example, a game you see, a whole like a ocean kind of thing. If it was on the PS5 only, you probably could have swam in that. Or if it was on the Series X only, you could swim in that. But because it's supporting the PS4 and the Xbox One, there's limitations on what they can do. Limitations on the rendering, limitations on features. Now, that was, just an out of the box, I'm doing this on the fly kind of thinking. Obviously, there are much more creative ideas that could have gone into it, but with limitations that these previous gen consoles provide, it is a problem. And they're not just supporting the Pro and the X version of the previous console, they're supporting the Xbox One version, which already had problems before it got upgraded. They're supporting the PS4 version, which had, limitations itself. Now, maybe if they actually went to the Pro and the X and said, these are the consoles we're supporting, maybe, but at that point it would defeat the whole purpose of previous generation. But I just think they need, this whole carrying your library forward is a problem. The thing that made the previous generation successful, you look at PS1 and Sega Saturn, they were standalone libraries. When you went to the PS2 and the Dreamcast, it was a fresh start, clean slate. Everything worked. You go to the PS3, you had the Xbox One. Well, Xbox OG. Clean slate. Then you went to the PS4 and the Xbox One. Clean slate. This whole bringing your games forward, in my opinion, has just made developers more lazy. And it's made creativity tank really hard. Because now companies are going, well, we could make a new IP and a new game and it will cost us how much money? What? That much money? But we could just re-release this on our Remake Station 5 and for a fraction of the cost and everyone's going to buy it. What do you think the companies are going to do? Go for something that's godly expensive that could be the start of a beautiful franchise, or remake a game? They're going to remake because it's quick money. At the end of the day, people need to realize that this is still a business. But the supporting of the previous generation has hurt this generation more than people understand.
Bring them to the farm. You see, it's time to make games that people actually want. We're talking a non-live service Batman game, an Assassin's Creed Black Flag 2, an actually good Halo game.
He's fun, I like him.
Or just look at what's popular in the mod scene and you'll get a hit. It's actually surprising how little companies do this. I mean, it worked for Dota, it worked for Team Fortress 2, it worked for Battle Royale, it worked for Counter-Strike, and all the gaming companies are like, we should make a Fortnite or a Destiny clone. Suicide Squad. Why? Money! But unfortunately, the lack of next generation games is just the first problem, because these consoles make playing games kind of difficult.
Dude, how is my timing that bad? How?
Yikes.
So let's say you get a brand new console. Here's a simple question for you. What should it do? It sounds simple enough, right? It should play video games, of course. But there's actually something else that I'm sure you'll remember after this.
Boom.
Now, if you didn't play the GameCube, then that just didn't work. But if you did, it's just one example of the magical experience a console can actually give players. And in every one of your favorite consoles, you'll find a similar experience when you play.
Was he actually waiting for me to react to that? Boom. If he did, kudos to him. Kudos, because I do that almost every time.
It for the first time. But what about the Xbox Series X? Oh, it's just an Xbox One, but I guess it's faster now. 600 Canadian dollars faster, I guess. And I guess my $600 wasn't enough to cover the ads either. Now, in fairness, when you boot the PlayStation 5, Sony says, hold my beer. That was like every single PlayStation merged into one super PlayStation, and I loved every second of it. But look what happens when I pop in an extremely expensive 90 Canadian dollar next generation physical game from this incredibly sad and empty plastic box into each console. Yeah, the game needs to install gigabytes of data or download larger and larger patches before you can even get a chance to play. So then you think to yourself, well, okay, I guess while I wait the mildly frustrating 30 minutes for this game to be ready, I can just, play one of the digital games that I already own. But then you find out that when you do that, the network speeds of your consoles are dragged into the frozen depths of HE double hockey sticks. So then you think, fine, okay, alright, I'll just play another game today and take the hit on the network speed so I can play the new 90 Canadian dollar next generation physical game from this empty plastic box tomorrow. But then the game that you decide to play also has a 60 gig update because of course it does. So at this point you're basically dead inside. But because you're desperate to play anything during the 2 hours of time you have left before you have to go to sleep to your corporate soul-sucking 9-to-5 job, you decide to play the most depressing game of Russian roulette to see which of the games you own doesn't need a 200 gig update until you almost assuredly give up and decide to watch someone else play games on YouTube or Twitch instead. And if that's your case, hello and welcome to the channel, okay? Now,
but I think that's a little harsh. That's been something that's been there even from the previous generation. It wasn't as prevalent, but it's something that's grown, and it's something that's there on PC as well. If you play a game on Steam while you're waiting for something else to download, it actually stops your download. Mine does anyway. Or it cripples the speed down to, a snail's storm. So I think going at it in that regard, I think is way unfair on both the Xbox and the PlayStation 5. At the end of the day, these are pretty much PCs. They're customized consoles, but at the end of the day, I still refer to them more or less as PCs, and they're going to work the same way as it does on the PC when it comes to that sort of networking. So I think this is a bit unfair. I think, that point that he made there, I get it's a thing and I get it's a reality. I mean, Call of Duty, for example, based on my internet connection, and with everyone using the internet, I couldn't really cripple everyone's net. So it took me like 3 days to download it. And I do get the frustration, right? I do. I genuinely do. But at the same time, this isn't this generation problem. This is something that's been around for ages. And it was a natural progression for games to be following that. And games will have updates. They're going to have whatnot. If you don't want the update, it's perfectly fine. Set your console to offline mode and boot the game up. It will boot and you will be able to play it. But if you want to download and stuff at the same time, well, there's always a catch, right?
At first glance, it seems like the console experience is objectively worse than those that came before. But if you're skeptical like I was, then don't worry, because I decided to bust out my older consoles to put this to the test. So, for the Xbox Series X, I found my original Xbox from over 20 years ago. The idea is simple. On the original Xbox, I'm going to try to play Halo Combat Evolved, a 20-year-old game. Then on the Series X, I'll try to play Halo Infinite to see which console lets me play the game first.
Again, this is really unfair.
Well, that's depressing. But you might not be convinced, so I repeated this same exact test with the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 2. On the PS2, I'm going to play Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, and on the PlayStation 5, I'll try Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. So this test was really interesting because even with 4K graphics, Insomniac somehow loaded Ratchet on the PS5 in almost half the time. But unfortunately, what you don't know is both of these consoles needed their games to be pre-installed ahead of time just so they could compete. Now remember, each of these consoles is playing a game that's pushing their hardware to the limit, but only the previous generations actually let me play the games immediately, and I don't even want to imagine what would happen if these newer consoles weren't connected to the internet. Like, these things have way more power, they have way faster hard drive speeds, and yet I can just play games faster over there. Because, you see, in the 9th generation, the games are worse, the play experience is worse, and in the Xbox Series X's case, it barely tries to do anything to trigger any form of nostalgia. I mean, who's launching the Xbox Series X 10 years from now being like,
oh man, the Jurassic World Dominion ad on the front dashboard that I paid 600 Canadian dollars for, and a subscription to Game Pass and Xbox Live. That's when gaming truly peaked. Ah, yeah. The nostalgia.
So is this just an Xbox bashing video? Because that's what I'm starting to see it becoming. I mean, there were some good points earlier, but the more I'm watching this, it's now just becoming, I'm going to bash Xbox because it's really easy to bash Xbox. And I don't know. That's the vibe I'm getting. We're halfway through the video. I'm really hoping that's going to change. But for the past 5 minutes, all it's been is Xbox bad, Xbox bad, Xbox bad. And he's literally trying to blame the whole 9th generation being bad on Xbox in this last 5 minutes, and I think it's full of shit. Sorry if you're watching this, but that's just my opinion.
So, here's the question. If the modern gaming experience boils down to a list of games that are slightly better versions of the previous generation's games that constantly require downloading and or updating, then why not just play games on the PC where the games look and run so much better and I can actually do something else while I wait for my game to download? The truth,
for 2 reasons. Number 1, unlike Xbox, which pretty much puts all their games onto PC anyway, so Xbox is not even in this debate anymore. If you're looking at the PlayStation, well, they've got exclusive games, right? Like Stellar Blade, like the Uncharted series, like the God of War series. Sure, they eventually go to PC. If you're willing to wait 1 to 5 years, like Ghost of Tsushima, you have to wait 5 years. If you're willing to wait 5 years, happy for you. I'm not willing to wait for that. But then you've got companies like Nintendo, which this video completely and utterly decides to ignore because it would negate 99% of everything they're saying. And you can't get any of those games on PC unless you illegally pirate them. So that's a reason why.
The truth is, most people wouldn't, which is exactly why we're seeing a dramatic surge in the popularity for PC gaming instead of console gaming that was traditionally always the place to play games first. But there's actually one more reason why people are moving to PC away from the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and it has to do with the way that these consoles treat people.
Okay, that's a good point.
You see, when it comes to video game consoles, there's actually 2 different eras of communication. The offline era, where you actually had to visit your friends, hang out, bring over a giant CRT TV, and the online era, where you have friends.
Oh, sorry.
Your friends hang out, bring over a giant CRT TV, and the online era, where you have friends lists, parties, and wonderful messages awaiting you.
Every single person who watches your videos are fucking stupid.
I'm actually nostalgic for
I feel so touched.
it. But somehow the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 online community feels like an absolute ghost town where there's technically millions of people playing, but no one ever talks. Y'all feeling a good sense of community?
Bravo is off.
Taking these zones, look closer to your fellow man, fellow Spartan.
Your team.
I love it. So, let's go back to 2007 to see just what the heck happened.
I mean, it is true.
Okay, it's 2007, and for some reason we talk like this. Broken, weird, Canadian, British accent. But that's just what 2007 was like. So, you want to play Halo 3 with your friends and your 360 hasn't red ringed. What are you to do? Well, first you need a microphone to communicate, and thankfully Microsoft graciously includes a pretty decent quality mic for the time with your Xbox 360. That means that anyone and everyone who has a 360 can communicate online right out the gate. So how do we go about communicating? Well, it is 2007, so communication software is...
Skype.
I'll be blunt, it's terrible. Skype is probably the best out there, but us Canadians, well, we were using MSN Messenger.
Oh, shit.
Fortunately, we're in luck, because sure, the communication software may have been total garbage.
Yeah. Skype in call.
But the software in these consoles were actually magnificent. You see, it had friends lists, a private party system that worked across any game, and like I mentioned before, some of the most wonderful voice messages you could have ever hoped for.
If I ever see you, I'm gonna fucking your face wide open, yeah?
Like I said, 2007 was a different time. But what about the game itself? How did we communicate with the others? You see, by default, Halo and every other multiplayer game let anyone with a microphone communicate openly. Lobbies were active, parties were well indicated on screen with an icon, and proximity chat was always turned on by default.
Oh no!
That's how you win. You don't need communication.
Mind-blowing, I know. Every single person you played with could be spoken to just like if we were playing sports in person. It was truly a community. But now let us forward back to the present day to see what the new consoles can do. Okay, so it's 2024 and the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X have a few small differences. Despite being more expensive, the consoles no longer come with microphones.
Next generation gaming!
Sony technically provides one embedded in the controller itself, to be fair, but unless you play like a complete psychopath, it's probably not going to gain mass adoption. Isn't it great that we can just talk right through this controller's mic?
If I ever see you, I'm gonna
You don't do that. That's weird. Next comes the communication software, and it's pretty much the same as before. But while this sounds great on paper, it's actually pretty bad given that it's been over 15 years. You see, companies like Discord have streamlined the way players communicate, and the consoles really haven't tried to keep up. The only innovation I could think of was that the consoles did technically add Discord integration, but in fairness, using Discord on a PC or a phone still feels infinitely better than the watered down version we get on the Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5. Like, I just use my phone. Or you know what I probably do is I just go on the PC instead. But okay, what about the games? How are they handling communication 15 years later? Well, let's use Halo again as an example to showcase the 15 years of innovation. And the reason I use Halo is because, quite frankly, Halo 2 and Halo 3 were revolutionary for really promoting communication within games. Each of these games kind of pushed things forward. Proximity chat, pre- and post-game lobbies, that all kind of stemmed from the Halos.
Man, I really miss at times the COD and Halo lobbies back from the old days. There was no filter at all, and it was savage as fuck. It was absolutely savage.
Me, like, dude, it's like 5 a.m. where you are. Go to sleep, and I just replied with Halo 3.
It no longer has pre- and post-game lobbies and hasn't for over a decade. It no longer has proximity chat. It does, however, support text chat between console and PC crossplay. So that's cool. But they completely block all forms of written or spoken communication with the enemy team entirely. And unfortunately, every game seems to have seen that and decided that rather than figure out a system that works for different communication styles, yeah, it's just easier to block everything completely so no one gets hurt.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
It's as if you played a game of basketball outside, but no one was allowed to talk to each other, and the only way you could talk to your team was to stop, pick up your phone, and then text them before someone hits you in the face with a basketball. And that sounds like a weird analogy, but it's like legitimately true.
I mean, it works. He's not joking. It works. I think the way that they had it in the past, you had the option to block communication or not, but it kind of gave you the option to speak to anyone freely, and I think that they really need to bring that back. And if you want to turn it off for whatever reason, you're free to do so.
Sure, I guess technically no one has a chance for harassment in that case.
What did you say, punk?
But it kind of loses a lot of the humanity in the process, don't you think? Look, I love video game consoles, their reveals, their launches, and what they do for the industry.
Some form of connectivity is called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360, that's your message?
Each one defined a specific...
Man, Jeff Grubb, Jeff Keighley, even back then, digging that knife in, although Don Matrick did the perfect job in doing that himself.
It's called Xbox 360.
Jeff Keighley, man.
Stick with 360, that's your message?
Like, don't have internet connection, stick with a 360. I mean, that was a horrible. That murdered Xbox One.
Each one defined a specific part of my life, and I'm pretty sure it did for you guys too. But the honest truth is that the 9th generation consoles are just overpriced, poor gaming experiences where the games are held back by less capable machines, corporate greed, and a censored online environment in a world where if I spend a couple extra $100, I get all of that and more on a PC. The market is basically being forced to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid if these problems continue, video game consoles we know and love will die slowly in a wasteland as nothing but a memory.
I wouldn't be afraid that they are going to die. And that's the reality. Sony has now started their push to PC, and that is obvious. Microsoft has been full PC integration for years now, and that is where they pretty much want everyone to be. It's starkly obvious. That way they don't have to worry about any games missing. They just work on their games. They're all on PC, which is arguably the best place to play these games. No FPS issues, no nothing. They graphically look better. So, Microsoft has already made that transition, and with news of their hybrid console being in the works or coming in 2026, that's just another step for it. And Sony obviously, I think the only true next generation console, well, I wouldn't even call it next generation. I'm sorry if you could hear that beeping. Someone outside is being a nuisance. But the only console right now that genuinely has exclusives, that is the only console that has full exclusivity where you cannot find their games anywhere else unless you pirate them, is Nintendo. And that is shocking.
Except, I don't think they have to. Because the magic of what made video game consoles so special to everyone never truly left. It's always been there, just waiting for someone. Anyone.
Just make better games. Get people excited. Get people wanting to play. Everything now is about seeing titties and ass and over-sexualized stuff. Like this whole SBI movement, which I'm not going to go into, but it's gone from one extreme to the other. Games like Tomb Raider were amazing to play, amazing to look at, and were an amazing experience. You look at Stellar Blade right now, and that game is getting more publicity for its over-sexualized Eve, especially with the new bikini outfit that's just been released right now. Everyone is going crazy because they want to shag Eve, a virtual character, because I guess they can't find a girlfriend in real life. But that aside, you know, it's crazy. I get looking at eye candy is one thing and wanting to see it, but trying to sell your game on the basis of over-sexualization, which is where we're at right now, has gone from the extreme of everything being ridiculously kind of censored and whatnot, and now you know, thanks to Shift Up, things have started to move to the right. And in fairness, thanks to Korean game development studios, they're pushing the scale the other way. Even games like The First Descendant embracing that side of things, but they're trying to push it too much and sell it on the virtues of those over-sexualizations, and I think that's also wrong. There needs to be a happy medium, and in the past, we had that happy medium. Now it's all over the place. Now it's either all about looks, and if the characters don't look great, no one is interested. Unless it's Concord, then no one's interested anyway.
To bring it back. 4, 3, 2, 1. To bring back games that aren't afraid to push the industry forward.
I am your shield. I am your sword.
To bring back experiences we'll never forget. And to put players first as a community anyone can play in.
You know, I remember when my mum, we weren't well off, and she knew, you know, the previous year we were financially in a really bad place. Barely enough to keep the electric on, barely enough to put food on the table. My mum was a machinist. My dad was a machinist. They would work, 20 to 22 hours a day, getting 2-3 hours sleep before going back to work just to keep the lights on. God bless them. And, I'll always be thankful for what they've done for us. But for like a year or two, she couldn't even afford to buy us like a Christmas present or a birthday present. And we understood. I mean, it was difficult because we saw everyone else having it, but we couldn't. And then I remember when the Dreamcast came out, she knew I was interested in it. She saw that I was looking at it constantly because I just love Sega. And she had been putting money away for so long because I was the only one that really didn't get anything. Like my other brothers were older, so they didn't need anything. And my younger brother, because he was the youngest, he got something. So I was usually the middle one that missed out on everything. And so she actually arranged and got imported a Japanese Dreamcast on Japanese launch day because it released in Japan for like almost 6 months before. And I remember opening that box and my mind was blown. I mean, if there was a video of it, I would put it up. But I still remember that day vividly where I had tears coming down from just pure overjoy. I wasn't expecting it because I knew the situation, and I'll forever be grateful for that sort of, for her generosity and just for her doing that. It was a special moment for me. But those moments today don't exist. You just see people, oh yeah, I got an Xbox Series X, I got a PS5, what game should I play? Like, then people are buying these without even knowing what they want to play. They're just buying it for the sake of buying it. There's the magic isn't there, right? And that's been lost in this generation, and I don't think it'll ever come back. It's like old school MMOs. If you played Final Fantasy 11 back when it came out, it was a different era to MMOing to what you have today, which is pretty much primarily a solo experience until you're forced to group up. So the eras are different, times have changed, and the ninth generation is suffering heavily from the previous 8th generation being so powerful and so good, and with the dragging everything forward and being able to play those games in one way is really good, but in another, it keeps those consoles alive for a lot longer, which means that companies are more inclined to develop for the bigger console base than they are for the smaller one. And that's why the ninth generation in consoles truly sucks. But yeah.
Am I here?
If you haven't left yet, I would advise that you sprint.
Xbox 360! For the PlayStation 2.
This brings such a smile to my face because I was there. I was there feeling this shit when it happened.
And it's on.
Going down to Toys R Us, my dad used to take us, and I used to play the N64 there and stuff. It was so
Just
cool.
one big social gathering, uniting people all over the world for,
Queuing up at midnight for games was just something different, man. You don't get that today, but it was a different vibe. It was a different experience. And when those doors opened up and everyone went in and that first person came out with that copy, pending they weren't mugged on their way to their car at midnight, everyone was cheering and
I hope you enjoyed the video.
enjoying it.
You're beautiful, you're goose-tastic, and as always, keep it cute.
Hey, can anyone hear me?
I think this was a really good video. I think this was a really good portrayal. I don't like the fact that he targeted the Xbox more just to try and push, I guess, at times it felt. But it does highlight other issues with Microsoft and Xbox where things haven't gone their way, and they've not really done anything to try and solve that problem either. But overall, I think he's right. The ninth generation is just a mess of where it's at. And, I think ultimately these are pushing people to PC. And maybe that's Sony's and Microsoft's ultimate aim, because making consoles is bloody expensive. So if they can get around that whole console thing, getting around the whole infrastructure of keeping and maintaining, the PSN chat service and live service and whatnot, and then just push it over to PC and then say, right, all we have to do now is make games and it's going to be available to everyone. Maybe that's the approach. Who knows? But great video nonetheless. I know it took me a while to get here, but great video. Thanks so much for watching. And if you've made it this far, I appreciate you. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. And let's have that discussion. Until the next one, stay safe.